We're Bitcoin Yucatan, and we're a very young, not even a circular economy. I would say we're in our LARPing phase at the moment, but we are trying to approach things it's a much broader design what we're trying to do. So we're literally just going to the communities and finding out what's going to be needing and trying to incorporate as much information from all the other projects that we have the benefit to follow. And so we'll give you a brief tour of our history and how we got started. So first of all, we are in the city of Mérida, which is the capital of the state of Yucatan. Oh, well, I should mention this at the beginning because very early on, we were getting lots of shocks and comments about the color of the logo we decided to use. And there's actually a form of pink called Mexican pink, and it is the national color. And what we were trying to explain to people is that we just found it more, we found it easier for the locals to relate to the color, and we were explaining to them, we just decided it. We didn't have to ask anyone. There was no committee, nothing. It just seemed appropriate for us, and that was part of the message that we were showing people that you can do with Bitcoin. It's really your own thing to make. You have to make it your own. So just for I guess perspective and comparison. So attempting to orange peel Mexico is not for the faint-hearted, and it's probably like one of the largest endeavors like we've ever set out to do. But we tried to be very, very strategic, which is something that we don't normally benefit from as a decentralized community, because we're all like excited puppies running in every direction, and we just want to tell everyone about Bitcoin. So we really started, well, the whole thing was born out of someone putting on Twitter, like, is there a Bitcoin Beach, Mexico? And we were really embarrassed that there wasn't. So then we started to have a look and look for a place that made the most sense, not some place that somebody was already living there. So we really started to study the geography of Mexico. And that's when we came across the idea. There is an existing tourism network in Mexico called Pueblos Magicos, so magical towns, and they get a lot of support from the government. And it coincided that the newest addition to that group of magical towns was right down the road from us. So then, instead of launching the initiative, what we did is we put out a call to all other Bitcoiners in Mexico to see if this seemed like a good idea, if it seemed like a good idea. So we had a lot of support people. We did another unconference, like a decentralized conference, where we had no basic idea other than to have Bitcoiners come down and assess together with us to see if it was something that would be viable. And that was a very interesting thing, because I think it's one of the few times where the goal was strategy. So for instance, we had people from other parts of Mexico that are doing their own thing, but agreed with us that this seemed like a better option, because as Bitcoiners, we really need to pull our resources together, because we're up against something much bigger than us. So that's just one example that really validated our vision. Because if they hadn't agreed, or if somebody had a better option, then I think we would have been in a position where we would have dropped our project and tried to go and support them. So that's, I guess, like an unusual start. And also, just real quick, so the scale of Mexico is what's daunting. So for comparison, like even just the third richest state in Mexico is comparable to the size of El Salvador and about 3 times the GDP. So, we have to be really strategic in Mexico. And let's go. So this is what do you want to take it?
So, welcome. This is what AI did for us when it came to Sisal. So again, anybody just walking in, yes, our Bitcoin is pink, but this is our ode to cultural sensitivity, because that's one thing that we think is really important with us coming into other communities, is we really need to embrace the culture of what was already there. So that's why you'll see all the pink. It's really not just me and Mercedes. So we did commit this with a very strategic way. We didn't want to just come in as a bunch of people and say, oh, look, here, download the Blink app. Now you accept Bitcoin. Do this. Now you accept Bitcoin. For us, what we really wanted to do is talk to the plebs when they came for the verification vacation and say to them, do you guys think we can pull this off here? Like, does this really look like the space? So we spent 5 days together, and this is our vision of what we see as Mexico's Bitcoin beach. So Sisal is the name of the town. So yeah, we all got a little silly there. Either way, so Sisal is the name of the town in Merida, or just outside of Merida. It's 25 minutes outside of Merida. And we tried to do some orange pilling there. It was really a full-on experience to see what kind of acceptance would be around. I think the plebs embraced it fully. We had DJ Peter Todd on the DJ booth. Not too often you have a Bitcoin core developer spinning your beats. Paco came down to check out because, you know, Paco's been to, I think, more circular economies than any pleb we know. So when it came to verification, we were like, you think we got this? And he came rocking his flamingo shorts, so clearly he thought it was pretty great. So we had our meetings in mangroves, as you can see, in the middle of the jungle. And it turned out the plebs said, yeah, I think you guys can pull this one off. So literally, that was the end of April. And we hit the ground running since then. So we're very new. We're just developing. But I do want to introduce our Bitcoin Madre. This is Mercedes. Mercedes is leading the women's education all throughout our Pueblos Magicos right now as the entry point. And I'm going to let you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being here with us. We have been seeing some of you in different dimensions of the Bitcoiner new world. And what I want to say, well, I don't know, those of you who attended yesterday the videos, we had Christian yesterday there, who is here filming for us the different workshops that we organize with women in the communities. What we think is that the women are the entry point in our communities because they are ready, particularly Yucatan. They produce all kind of wonderful things like the dresses that you can see they are wearing over there. There are a lot of products like hammocks, and particularly they produce honey, like you, the ones who attended the video. Christian was able to even film a tiny little entry point where everything starts. It's a transformation from the Maya culture. There has been a lot of richness, a lot of the pre-Hispanic cultures we have in Mexico. I think it's around 68 ethnic groups. Those of you who are here, correct me if this is not exact number. But it's the difference with Central America and Mexico is we preserved our pre-Hispanic cultures. Central America almost eradicated all the pre-Hispanic cultures, and there's very little left. But in Mexico, those of you who know the country, is very alive, this culture. Not to talk about the Maya culture, and I say this because you see the pyramids that we're able to build, and this is important because culture has been there. And I've been working in development for over 40 years, and in development there is the tendency to assume that history starts from the moment that observers arrive. And I'm afraid that we have to be very attentive with Bitcoin that this doesn't happen this time. We had a long tradition in Latin America. I come from this generation where we had the same ideals of freedom that Bitcoin, but we didn't have the tool. And we had a lot of thinkers, like in Brazil, if there is a Brazilian person here, Paulo Freire was very meaningful to us throughout the movement in Latin America. And he stated, by educating others, we educate ourselves. That means that it's not one direction education. It's not that we Bitcoiners arrive and teach the community what is Bitcoin about. In the process, we learn a lot about what was already there in the community. To tell you a bit about my personal history, I'm here, I've been working on over 50 countries throughout Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Here I am in Tanzania with the Maasai community, trying to convince the women how important it is, the cataract surgery, because they are blind, sometimes they cannot see, and it's essential for them to move in these villages. So it's a very sensitive point that we arrive there and make a bridge with what already exists. I grew up, this is my mother, I was born when she was 15 years old. I grew up in the slums of Mexico City. For me, poverty is not as the foreigners see poverty, or is not as developers or donors see poverty. Probably that's why I was hired as advisor to the British government, the Danish government, or the Dutch government, because I could understand poverty from inside. And poverty is not just like a black hole. People have a lot of things there to contribute and to educate the Bitcoin community as well. So we have to go and learn from them, and not to think that history starts when we arrive there. So this is another project in Kenya as well. And I think that, to me, Bitcoin represents lots of things that I have been living throughout my life. Like minimalism was a reality before it was trendy, because I grew up in poverty, so then there was nothing. My grandmother was a Nahuatl indigenous woman, barefoot all her life, hardly spoke Spanish, and I learned a lot from her because I had to walk as a little girl, like cross mountains to barter. I didn't see money before 10 years old, maybe. So it was the reality in Mexico. Money is new for the indigenous communities. Mexico, maybe the bankers that you see, well, they have been very familiar. But for the ordinary population, particularly in the rural areas in Mexico, minimalism was a matter of fact. So my question is, being in this Bitcoin world, is it possible to move from acceptance to adoption? Because adoption means development. Adoption means that once you hear and logical structure, coherent ideas about why money is as it is nowadays and why it's better to adopt Bitcoin, you might convince me to accept it. But the problem is to sustain throughout my life the adoption of this coin. And that is going to be the challenge I think we're going to face, because we arrive into communities, and you are already sadly seeing in El Salvador, even demonstrations that they think that the president is arbitrarily imposing this coin, and they are very unhappy, and they don't think that it's possible to introduce it in El Salvador, or they see it even worse as something that is worsening their economy. So we have to be very careful, because adopting is a completely different concept. We have to work also in development. We have to work hardly in education, but I think we have to work also hardly in development. This is important because sometimes we think our task ends where they accept. But to me, the sustainability, long-term goals are essential if we want to make this solid, and Bitcoin is here to stay. So we have to have a perspective how we move from acceptance to adoption. We are facing this in our communities. As Daniel and Amanda were saying, we are just kind of starting, but we already know, for instance, we start from scratch, but we decided to educate the communities where some Catholic priests have invested over 35 years of education, trying to rescue the traditional practices of cultivating the land among the Mayas. We lost it. We lost it because we are all Americans eating all this processed food. And Yucatan, where we are now #1 in diabetes, #1 in obesity. Why? Because we changed our diet. We hardly eat nopales, or what we used traditionally to eat, beans, corn, or Monsanto was very clever, and then we had our corn of 10 centimeters, and now it's 20 centimeters or 30 centimeters long. Yeah, because everything is this fiat money that contaminates even the corn. Everything is contaminated. So I think we have to revise our mindset and see how do we move forward with this Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin to me represents like the opportunity to, as many of you have said in other presentations, to go into questioning all these fiat industries that we had and how the distortion of the female image for him, for example, when I go to the community, well, they hardly recognize themselves as something they see in the ordinary middle-class woman, even in Yucatan, because their dress is completely different. So they don't see themselves in this population that is inviting them to join this Bitcoin world. And I think we have to make an effort to make a cultural bridge and be humble enough to see that, well, we have to learn from them. And the history started before we arrived, so what is there in order to be able to talk their language so that they understand this highly sophisticated world of Bitcoin. I admire a lot all the nerds that I see around, but I can see how difficult it is psycho-emotionally to talk to them, because, for instance, yesterday I was at dinner, and it's hard to talk to one of them, because, I mean, the other day I had a conversation with a hacker, and I was like, oh, what is he telling me? Yes, artificial intelligence, but I couldn't decode anything else. And obviously he was revealing wonderful secrets, but I couldn't grasp them. So I felt like these women in the community, that they hardly understand sometimes what we are talking about. So we had in the movement in Latin America, I don't know, those, especially Brazilians, had a very, very good, like we had a theology liberation, a priest for the people, a community-based approach in the Catholic Church. And then the Jesuits, very advanced, they were expelled from by the Pope, and they were like in countries like Brazil, the priests were, one of them was ordained to be silent for years because we couldn't talk. I mean, we see it now in Canada nowadays, which is worrying. But I mean, now we can forbid someone to talk about what we don't like in the power elites, isn't it? So then Helder Câmara is a Brazilian who was very relevant in the movements in Latin America. And he says, it does not matter that you arrive quickly and alone. What matters is that we arrive together and on time. So Bitcoin, I think, has to make an effort for having an identity collectively, because it was born as individual projects. Yes, I want to make money. Oh, if I invest here, I will be rich, and I'm becoming rich, and all of a sudden I'm rich. But is that an end to a project as humanity? It might be more to offer from Bitcoin. We might need to just be in a different perspective to see unbanked people, by first time in history, has the opportunity to access the financial world. In the communities we work, they produce all kinds of things, particularly women. That's why I think women are ready to adopt Bitcoin, because they badly need it. If I talk to the Swedish women, they don't care, because they have everything. But if I talk to the women in Yucatan or in Africa, they will need it. So that's what I'm convinced, that I have to have women as an entry point. I don't exclude men. Men are wonderful. But the societies where we live in throughout Latin America tend to be dominated by this macho approach. And the development that has been here is a colonial approach, paternalistic, condescending. So we need to question those models. So I think it's enough. Thank you very much. For those of you who have a question, you are very welcome.
One more thing I just wanted to mention. We have over here the lovely Christian Lara from Panoramica Films, and Christian's been spending time with us lately documenting adoption in Mexico across our Pueblos Magicos. 25 minutes was not enough to get into the nitty-gritty of what we've really been up to this year. So take a scan of that QR code if you have time, and that will link you to the 2 videos that have already been released in the docuseries of Bitcoin adoption in Mexico. Also, I wanted to say, even though they're not here, thanks to Viva Bitcoin, who's been our largest supporter along this year in our journey, and Carlo's going to give out some little goodies in a bit, and to Geyser, because we were very appreciative of our grant.
Yeah, so the other thing, so we haven't really gone into where we are at the project, but we're hoping to launch like in a more grown-up way next year. So we actually acquired a building in the center of Merida, which is just the cultural hub of what we intend to do. And we'll be educating, we'll be doing day trips, and we'll be inviting Bitcoiners to come and visit and take them to all the communities where we work. So we're quite excited, but we're still early in our development. But yeah, and we also like to invite people to come to other parts of Mexico. So there's a lot of other projects that we're working alongside. But, oh, well, actually, I'll give you a bit of news, because this is like, so we have in Mexico, as of now, we just found out after, shout out to Francisco there, who just ran the Bitcoin block party in Mexico. So we have Banco Azteca, some of you might have heard Ricardo Salinas, like his national bank, biggest bank in terms of branches, over 2,000 branches in the most remote parts of Mexico, already has a Lightning-enabled app with off-ramp into pesos. So for us, from an infrastructure perspective, Mexico is a done deal, right? Like as of now, they haven't announced it yet because they're still in the final stages, but there's going to be a huge, huge splash coming to Mexico. And so then the real challenge is education, because infrastructure is there. And hopefully we'll have some great news from Francisco in terms of the tools that we'll have available for orange pilling. But yeah, so that's where we really need people's support to support the education mission. And we also see Mexico as a completely strategic thing, because we describe it as a domino that falls both ways. It has an influence north towards the US and Canada in terms of how many migrants are actually living there, and of course remittance being like the one of the biggest advantages for them. And it's a domino that falls south in terms of the economic influence it has over Central and South America by the language. So yeah, please like follow Christian and follow our development, and we'd love to see you in Yucatan very soon. Thank you.
Just one last thing, one that we think that as we invite these magic towns in Mexico to join, the emphasis for us is in the southern part of Mexico, because we see like a corridor from Mexico, southern Mexico, to Guatemala, to El Salvador, because the Maya culture has been there. If you check the names here in El Salvador, you will see it has a lot of Nahuatl names, Mayan names. So we want to emphasize this Maya root as the Bitcoin emphasis for us, and in the economic dimension that this could have. Thank you very much.
So on that front, so we partnered up with IBEX, and we're getting a lot of support because they were based in Guatemala. Obviously, they handle all the liquidity for El Salvador, and they've just moved their offices to Mexico City. So that's what we're trying to create, a meme for Bitcoiners, to create an economic zone between Yucatan, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And right now we're talking to the other communities, and there's lots of enthusiasm about doing something like that. So yeah.
Oh my God, sorry whoever I'm going over on. I just wanted to announce, so we did invite you guys all to Bitcoin Yucatan, but also Tally, who is the host of the Orange Hatter podcast, will be hosting the very first Bitcoin Women's Retreat in Yucatan with us in March of next year. So it's so excited. One more.
And the very, very last one, when I was at my first Bitcoin, I made a request, because there is a beautiful project here that after my first Bitcoin have educated a group of football players together with some of the women in the community. And now they have been working over 6 months to create a community project, and they need some support. And I thought those of you who are ready with your generosity to give some contribution to La Piraya, and it's a small island that is here in El Salvador, that is facing all kind of challenges. We are aiming to build a toilet as example to the community. The toilet is, people ask me, why is it so expensive? Because we figured out that it was like $800 dollars, and $700 for, they have a lot of coconut and they need to press to extract the oil. Now they do it by hand. It would be very helpful to have this elemental machine that would make easier the work for women, and that is $700. Altogether is $1,500. So we are aiming to this amount, and now we have, how much, Isaac? ¿Cuánto tiempo tienes? ¿Cuánto tiempo tienen más o menos aproximado que han juntado? Como $500 y los 100 ¿no? And so we have about $600 that we raised. Whoever, if you want to spread among your friends, whoever wants to donate to La Pirraya, we can give you the code, and Amanda has it already. And also through My First Bitcoin, you can donate to them. And it will be, for us, it's a very important target, because then we enable the couple that is here with us. They are the ones who are leading the project now. It's been transferred just 3 days ago from the expat from Bitcoin to the local Bitcoiners in the community, peer-to-peer. Yes, thank you so much.